Pretty much.
Alrighty. Boom, 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 boom.
Fallacies.
Boom, boom. All right. So.
Aren't fallacies
Yes.
like illusions?
No. No.
Yes, they are in psychology.
What if I'm just making it easier?
So, let's take a look at what we came up for contrasting Thanos with the Avengers. So take out your sheets, take out your answers. I'm just going to be collecting these from you in a little bit, so make sure your name's on them.
Oh. A false notion.
Yes. All right. So, tell me what sentence is happening in the paragraph that starts with the emphasis on the individual is echoed in Infinity War. Give me a sentence that gives you information about Thanos that you can later contrast with information about the Avengers. Let's just go through this one sentence at a time. The emphasis on the individual is echoed in Infinity War as Vision, who is in possession of a crucial Infinity Stone, suggests that the rest of the team kill him to prevent Thanos from obtaining it. Does that give you any information about Thanos? Colin, you're shaking your head no.
Not the answer number 7.
Yeah, right. It's a sentence that has the word Thanos in it, but it's not giving you anything about Thanos that you can contrast. Steve Rogers emphatically shuts this down. We don't trade lives. The franchise's ultimate villain, Thanos, has constructed his entire evil plot around sacrificing others for what he perceives as the greater good. Is that a good sentence to focus on? Yeah. Depends on so what is this sentence saying about Thanos? Sacrifice in order to save the greater good. Now, holy buckets, right after the word good, we see what sort of punctuation? Semicolon. So that means what type of relationship is going to exist between after the semicolon with before the semicolon? A close relationship. Let's see. The Avengers are positioned against him and against mass sacrifice of any kind. So here we see the beginnings of a contrast. Whereas Thanos will sacrifice great numbers for the greater good. The Avengers, according to this sentence, are against the idea of mass sacrifice. The contrast, they even give it the word, comes into play repeatedly throughout the movie. Time and again, the heroes are faced with the choice of letting someone die or to protect the Infinity Stone. And each time they refuse. Doctor Strange begins by telling Tony that it should come down to a choice between saving him, Peter Parker, and the Time Stone. The fate of the universe depends on the Time Stone. For Tony telling him it was the only way. Granted, because it's 2018, fan theories abound as to what this line could tell us about the plot of Avengers 4. Blah, blah, blah. None of these subsequent sentences tell us anything more about Avengers and Thanos. So, Monty, read me your sentence. What did you write for question 7?
While Thanos' plan is to mass sacrifice people for the greater good, the Avengers refuse to mass sacrifice people at all.
Kyler, tell me if that's a good answer or not. It's a very good answer. Nice sentence structure to indicate contrast, and the contrast is true based on what's happening in this paragraph. Monty, call one other person. Logan, read me your answer.
Thanos is willing to sacrifice others for the greater good, and the Avengers disagree.
I want you to say that one more time, class. Listen very carefully to a sentence.
Thanos is willing to sacrifice others for the greater good, while the Avengers disagree. Or I was finishing.
Okay. While the Avengers are what?
Against the
Of
self-sacrifice.
Okay, that's not what he said the first time. Listen to this sentence. Thanos is willing to sacrifice many in order to achieve a greater good, and the Avengers are not willing to do that. What word in that sentence is bad word choice?
Bad.
Nope. And why is the word "and" a bad word, Monty? So what would be a better word to sub in the place of "and"?
While.
but,
Or yet.
or yet. Yep, that coordinating conjunction that indicates contrast. And lastly, Ms. Fensling, can you please read us yours?
Daniel states the literal definition of heroism, sacrifice for the greater good, while the Avengers take the more modern definition of heroism.
Aren't willing to sacrifice. Okay, good. All right, question number 8. Compare Infinity War to Fallout. Now, somebody give me the sentence that begins the illustration of how Infinity War compares to Fallout. Like Fallout. Yeah. Like Fallout, Infinity War posits that there's a greater value at stake than emerging victorious in value or battle. There is a moral victory and one of personal loyalty to consider. The only valid choice in the face of Thanos' all-consuming logic, obvious fallacies about resource management aside, is to act to save the person in front of you to help whoever you can. Now, the challenge here is that there are 3 sentences that talk about how Avengers Infinity War is like Fallout. This is a complicated idea that demands a complicated sentence. So who thinks they have a good one? Miss Cody?
I don't know where I might have it.
Oh my gosh. Miss Johnson?
No.
Miss Cumlin?
You said who thinks they have a good one?
Okay, all right, fantastic. So why don't we take 30 seconds to a minute and make sure we draft a sentence that states the interesting comparison between Fallout and Infinity War based on the relevant sentence. Ready, set, go. All right, Ms. Cumlin, lay it down for us.
Both Fallout and Infinity War have a larger value at hand other than just winning. They both have moral victories and personal loyalties that need to be taken into account.
Beautiful. And what makes that beautiful is that you don't just say Avengers and Fallout take into consideration personal loyalty, because that's not precisely what the sentence is saying. It's saying that those things are just as or more important than the victory in the battle, right? Which is what you get at with the beginning of your sentence. So that's very good. Ms. Wiswell, please read yours.
both Infinity War and Fallout, the ideas of loyalty and moral obligations are present, and what protagonist ultimately decides to listen to when push comes to shove.
And what is the one thing you're missing? That is greater and of more importance than victory in battle. Okay? Because it says it right there. Posit that there is a greater value at stake than emerging victorious from battle. So it's not just here's this value that connects them. It's that value is more important than emerging victorious. Shab, what'd you have?
Like Fallout, Infinity War believes that there is more at stake than winning a battle. There isn't just battle victory, there's moral victory and personal loyalties that can be taken.
Very good. Does that make sense, class? Now, hopefully we're starting to see that the answers to these questions don't just exist out there in the air, and it's up to us as the reader to sort of like pull ideas out of the ether and put it together. These answers are where? In the text. And it's just a matter of us figuring out, where do I have to look in the text in order to find the answer? You know, compare Infinity War to Fallout. Well, there's a sentence that starts with like Fallout. So maybe I need to pay close attention to that. Contrast Thanos with the Avengers. Well, here's this Thanos talking about the greater good, and then followed by the Avengers are positioned against him. So these sentences, these moments in the text should be popping out to you based on whatever question it is you're trying to answer. And if you're able to do that, well, then your reading comprehension is really able to start to take off. If you can begin to think about and organize, where is stuff located? How do I find it? And then how do I communicate that in my own words? Now, these last couple questions, this should be repeat almost, because we've already explored these ideas ad nauseum without even looking at your sheet. We've compared Fallout to Infinity War, right? We answered a question about that. What's the other movie that makes an appearance in here? Deadpool. Okay. Well, somebody tell me again how Fallout is like Infinity War. The question we just answered. They what?
Focus on more the moral victories and personal loyalties rather than just coming up with
Personal loyalty, moral victory, commitment to the group, commitment to human emotion as opposed to emerging victorious in battle. Go back to the first paragraph where it mentions Deadpool. Do you see those ideas as being present with Deadpool? How so, Mr. Monty? Is identifying with a traumatized kid. So that is Deadpool putting more value in terms of like personal loyalty and connection with another human than beating this traumatized kid in battle. So our answer to this is kind of just a repetition of our answer to the comparison between Infinity War and Fallout. Kyler, can you please read your answer? Please read your answer for number 9. How are all of these movies similar?
All of them are successful blockbusters with characters audiences enjoy. Their fantasies filled with superheroes and are certain to improve their storytelling capabilities with their advancement of heroism being more applicable as they are more trying to set apart their moral tendencies rather than victory.
So you have a lot of comparisons in there. Is everything that Kyler said true? Are they all blockbusters? Yep. What's the second thing you mentioned? The likable characters,
Yeah.
right? Likable characters. Is that true? Identifiable heroes. Is that true? But can anyone point out what Kyler's answer, where it kind of misses the mark? Well, as your list, read it one more. The right answer is in there, but it's surrounded by stuff that's not necessarily present in the article. Please read it one more time. While she's reading it, as a class, pay attention to what points does the article raise, what points is Kyler putting into the article. One more time.
Okay, repeat it again, because the last part I just said.
You just like made up?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, just give it a shot, Kyler.
It's gone. I can read the first part again. All
Yep.
these movies are successful blockbusters about saving the universe and filled with characters audiences adore. They're fantasies filled with superheroes and are designed to improve their storytelling capabilities.
And each movie features a group of heroes that are more heroic because of their personal loyalty and commitment to each other, as opposed to winning a battle. Okay, so the first part that Kyler read, is all of that true?
Yeah.
Is that in here?
No.
Okay. The second part that she read the first time and that I put in there the second time, is that in here?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the problem with my answer then?
Was like that on whole.
Yeah, with that as a whole.
You're just surrounded it by too much unimportant
There's
stuff.
it's not that it's unimportant.
Okay, it's unnecessary.
Unnecessary, not relevant. Yeah, not relevant. Hey, who supposes they have one that sticks to the relevant deets? Benzel. Okay.
All three movies are similar in the sense that heroism is showed through the characters as they act in compassion and loyalty towards individuals and sacrifice for the world equally.
Read that one more time.
All three movies are similar in the sense that heroism is showed through the characters as they acted in compassion and loyalty towards individuals and sacrifice for the world equally.
What do you mean by sacrifice for the world equally?
Well, for the greater good.
So what do we think of that one? Why are you like this?
Could be stated
What part could be stated differently?
sacrifice for the world.
Yeah, the sentence crushes it until you get to that part about sacrifice, because this is making very clear that this is, heroism is no longer defined just by sacrifice for the greater good. It's not that is not present, but that is not all there is to it. So maybe if you started your sentence by presenting like the sacrificing for a greater good is the traditional notion of what makes a hero, but these movies complicate that ideal by, and then moving on with that. So it's just the way in which you present that sacrifice in your sentence that gives us some pause. The first 2/3 of it were fantastic. Calling someone else, Miss Benson.
all of these movies are tied to the idea of some sort of sacrifice, with the person who fills the role of hero being the one to do something out of loyalty to the world.
What do we think about that? Miss Wiswell, what would you say about that answer? Based on what I just told Benslin. And in what way?
I say that like sacrifice is what typically we can come when it comes to a hero.
Yeah, and then you can move on from there. The last question. What point is the author trying to make about heroism? Is that any different than the previous question? Why you say kind of, Shop?
Because the first one was comparing all of the movies,
Mm-hmm.
but number 10 is understanding why the author wrote it.
And so what is the point the author's trying to make about heroism, Shop?
Want me to read mine?
Sure do.
The point that the author is trying to make about heroism is that there are many aspects of it, there are many challenges, and it is what we should be and do. The author is trying to say that heroism is much more than having superpowers, it's having the power and will to do good. They're trying to say that no big or small problem, they're trying to say that no big or small problem is we can and should all be heroes.
The one thing that I think you're missing from stating just kind of like emphatically in that is that idea of heroism as being commitment to each other, as caring about humans, and that you slap that in there and it's good to go. Does that make sense, class? Is the idea that answers to stuff don't just exist in the air. They exist in specific parts, in specific words, and it's up to you to just find those words that are relevant to your question. Does that make sense? Okay. Make sure your name's on this bad boy. and then hand her in.
Question.
Answer.
I have a word that I'm trying to think of.
Mhm.
It's like the light dusting that's on the road.
Okay.
Light dusting.
So use, right, give me a sentence without the word.
There is a tiny bit of blank on the road.
So,
Sleet?
Yeah.
Is it slippery? enough?
Freezing rain or sleet.
is it slippery? Yes, it is. Did you go like that, you're gonna, not yet. But almost.
No, he just somersaults over rocks.
Yeah, I just flipped my car over rocks, you know.
He's trying to
You're
work
gonna
on his
want to
hard
open up your
aspects.
notebooks to a spot where you can write notes, or wherever you've been keeping, wherever you've been keeping notes for that glossary of terms. You can get some more terms.
Yeah, I'll have moved on hardcore. That's cool. Good for
But it's
you.
because this month is so frustrating.
It is frustrating. And it takes forever.
Well, it depends on
Although
how
I
much
did-
you know your opponent. If you know your opponent pretty well, it's pretty easy.
I used to have electronic talking battleship. Oh, that was fun. It was a board because you could play against a computer, and it would make the same sound effect, like, or battleship hit. You're like, okay, cool, battleship. But you really got excited when it would go. Patrol boat hit. So that was only the two little piece. You know what I mean? It was a big board, so stuff. All right, so jot down things as they are popping up to you. I'm going to give you some moments to reflect on this stuff and provide examples. So don't feel like you need to feverishly copy down everything. Okay, so we're going to talk about logical fallacies. Fallacies are a misuse of evidence. We led off the year talking about how you use evidence in the they say, I say model. We talked in the beginning of the year about quote framing. And when we were doing that, we were more concerned about if you are able to use evidence, and we were concerned about how you are talking about evidence. Now we're going to become concerned about what evidence you're using and the way in which you're talking about it. So it's not just enough to have great analysis that answers the questions how and why. Now you have to make sure that everything you're doing is logical, makes a ton of sense, and is true to your source, and you aren't abusing or misusing evidence. So today is all about the ways in which people use and abuse evidence. I would imagine that if a frame of reference for you should be, how many of you have taken sociology? Or a class with Potter where you guys are debating? Okay. Now, those debates are going to be riddled with these types of fallacies. And what I want you to do as we go through these, I'm always going to stop and ask you to either come up with your own example of a fallacy or come up with your own, or where you've heard or seen one of these things. Use your participation in those debates as evidence here. So let's carry on. So logical fallacy, it's a weakness in the argument. It occurs in the use of evidence, a lack of a logical connection between the claim and the evidence. The first way we can think of logical fallacies is a fallacy of relevance. So you're using evidence that is irrelevant to your claim. So an example would be a red herring. Notice how I've used red text to talk about a red herring. That's appropriate. A person skips to a new and irrelevant topic in order to avoid the topic of discussion. So that's a fallacy of relevance. We're talking about topic A. I no longer want to talk about topic A, so I'm going to change the terms of the discussion to topic B. Here's an example of how it appears in like politics. We can debate climate change until the cows come home, but when are we going to talk about partisan bickering? What is the relevant topic in this statement down here? Climate change. How does the person who said this avoid that topic? to partisan bickering. So this is an example of a red herring. I'm deliberately changing the topic because I don't want to talk about climate change. It'd be more interesting for me to talk about partisan bickering. If you ever watch not that I would recommend you do this because these shows are incredibly boring and they make you want to gouge your eyes out with a spoon. But if you ever watch a morning news show, you ever watch like a Sunday political talk show, if you ever watch CNN or Fox News, oftentimes there's a guest that comes on there. In this case, that guest is Morgan. And the host will ask the guest a tough question. They'll say something like, Morgan, there are hurricanes that are ravaging the shore. The sea level's rising, this, that, and the other thing, and yet you voted against providing money to help save people from stuff. What do you have to say about that? And then that person, instead of addressing those questions or addressing the topic, will just completely change the topic of discussion. They'll say something, Morgan would respond with something like, hey, now's not the time to talk about those tragedies. Let's instead talk about how, the vitriol of the discourse is not reflective of what it means to be American. That's a red herring. I'm trying to get you to answer a question about this, and you're just trying to change the subject to avoid the topic. A subtler way of doing this would be me saying, hey, Logan, Dawson is a terrible person because he puts small animals in microwaves. Okay? Now, Logan wants to go red herring on me. Logan goes, yeah, but he trained a bunch of mice to cure cancer. Okay. So a little bit of a red herring there because what has Logan done? He's changed the topic entirely. We're trying to talk about him being terrible because of what he does to animals in microwaves, and he's bringing up this thing that you like, yeah, is it a counterpoint to what I'm saying? Yeah, kind of. It certainly does fit, Dawson being a good person. If he trained mice to cure cancer, good for you, Dawson. But he's not sticking around with the topic that we are talking about. So that's an example of, or those are all examples of red herrings. What I want you to do right now is come up with your own scenario wherein a red herring is being used. Think back to your debates with Mr. Potter's class. Think to your life, or just invent a sentence like this. This sentence is an example of somebody using a red herring. Does that make sense, class? Just jot it down. Yep. You don't need to write a full sentence. You just need to be able to understand the example of a red herring. Midrow, what do you have? Nothing? Cody?
Yeah, yes, it's not very good, but.
Don't try to change the topic. Give it. What's your example?
Okay, I said we can debate on how there's a serial killer roaming the halls of our school, but when are we
So we're changing from the discussion of the serial killer to vaping. Yeah, great. Wisdom, what do you got? Nothing? Mester.
So I kind of did like a conversation.
Yep.
So Tosh, so recently, Ellen, we've noticed you throwing some shade at Oprah. Ellen responds, some people in the industry work and some don't. I've been working on a co-opted show with Dr. Phil recently.
Oh my goodness.
So how do we see that as an example of a red herring?
It's like, yeah, we could talk about this, but like,
But
no.
let's talk about that. Now, does somebody over here have a good one? Okay.
All right, so we're sitting around the library talking, and Luke Dawson's over here arguing that LeBron's the GOAT and not MJ.
Okay.
Or no, I'm arguing that MJ's the GOAT and LeBron's bad. And he changed the subject to, Timberwolves are on a 5-game winning streak.
Yeah. So just complete. I mean, that's like an extreme example. Yeah. All right.
How many games do you think?
Now, what does this word mean?
Ad hominem means an argument against character.
Argument against character. Okay. Now, that can also be a fallacy. It's a fallacy if your argument about someone's character is irrelevant to the topic at hand.
You said it.
That's not to say that every ad hominem argument is a bad thing to do. It's only a bad thing to do if the person's character is not germane to what we're talking about. Okay, so for example, don't build this park because Mr. Lindenberg was arrested for stealing a Snickers bar. That is an ad hominem argument, right? How are you disparaging my character?
Stole a Snickers.
Pointing out that I stole a Snickers bar. Hey, here's another ad hominem argument. We can't trust Mr. Lindenberg to supervise the food storage because of his history of stealing Snickers bar.
Now that's relevant because your theft was
About the same
About
other
food.
coach in charge of.
So which one of these two sentences is a good one and a fair use of ad hominem argument? 2, which one of these sentences is a demonstration of an ad hominem fallacy? 1, okay? Someone else, give me an example of an ad hominem fallacy.
So we want to make one like the first.
Yep. I'm not going to let Dawson go to the bathroom because he said mean things to Melanie. What's the fallacy there?
That should have anything to do with it.
That doesn't have anything to do with whether or not he's trustworthy enough to go to the bathroom. Logan.
Don't listen to Dawson in class because he pumps porta potties for a living.
Oh, yeah. Well, that is an ad hominem fallacy for sure. That has no relevance to why we should or shouldn't listen to Dawson. God, Dawson, get Logan back here. That's-
Taking all these bids.
yeah. I apologize for that. For me, it's because you're sitting in the middle of the room, so you're right in the wheelhouse.
I had a good one that's not about Logan, kind of.
There's going to be some reading to do. Check on the jigger.
Oh, no.
What'd you say, Dawson?
I had one that's not about Logan.
Okay,
Adrian Peterson's a terrible running back because he was arrested for child abuse.
very good. That being arrested for child abuse certainly points out his character is bad, but does that have anything to do with him as a running back? No. Wonderful. Oh, can't do that. A faulty analogy. So faulty analogy is where you're comparing two things that are not comparable, or you're focusing on irrelevant or inconsequential similarities between two things. You often see this when somebody tries to connect two different points. The most classic student example is how everyone loves to connect things to World War II or the Holocaust. Oh, that's just like Hitler. Oh, that's just like the Holocaust. That's your only historical frame of reference. So whenever we bring up something, students are very eager to connect it back to World War II or the Holocaust. Now, at times, are there serious and relevant connections between present day and World War II and the Holocaust? Well, absolutely. But people just throw it out there way too much. When you're creating an analogy or when you're considering an analogy, you need to gauge whether the dissimilarities outweigh the similarities. Okay, so for example, in advertisements, oftentimes you will see, like a watch advertisement or a perfume advertisement. You'll see this hunky person with the watch participating in some sort of sport. Think about all those Apple commercials, right? We're swimming in the Fitbit, we're swimming, we're playing tennis. One of my favorite commercials, because it's so weird and stupid, is Michelob Ultra. That beer commercial, somebody's gonna get out of a swimming pool and then they have themselves a Michelob Ultra, or they play tennis and they're sweating and then they have themselves a Michelob Ultra. What in all of these, the Michelob Ultra, the fitness bands, the watches, what is the comparison that's being made? What's the analogy that's implied? If you have this watch, what? It's not just that you're cool.
You're gonna be more like
You what, Miss Wisball?
You'll turn sporty.
Yeah, you'll turn sporty. Yeah, you'll be fit. Most people who wear Apple watches or fitness trackers
Are not fit.
or just use them to monitor their steps. I'm going to succumb to this myself. I'm going to buy an Apple Watch or something like that because A, I need a watch, and B, I want that information. I am not going to start swimming in the morning. I am not going to start going on runs. I'm just going to try to make sure that I'm not a sloth.
See, Fitbits help people who are like, oh, I should probably walk more, because then they can be like, oh, I've only taken X amount of steps today. So
The
they
exact
might get a
opposite.
little bit more athletic, but not really.
Right.
Whereas if you got somebody like Garmin or something,
Right.
that's like you have
And-
to run X amount of distance to break it
And
down.
and that Michelob Ultra is the most heinous use of this because it's suggesting that beer is being equated to sport, which is a faulty analogy. They're trying to make you feel like, oh yeah, if I drink Michelob Ultra, I can drink that and still be fit. Guess what? You drink 1,000 of them on the couch, there's no way you're going to be fit. Another way to do that is like an argument form, a faulty analogy, and this is classic debate type stuff. We put animals out of their misery, when they're in irreversible pain and about to die. So why don't we just do that for humans? Okay. Now, that's not to say that you can't make the argument that like assisted suicide or euthanasia is a pro thing to do, but this is a faulty comparison. Why is this a faulty analogy?
Animals are a little bit different than humans.
Animals are way different than humans. Absolutely. So this is something that sounds like it's smart and sounds like you're making a punchy point, but this is a faulty analogy because there is a lot of distance between animals and people. And so if you're going to make the argument that euthanasia is a good thing or something that should be done, don't do that by saying we put animals out of their misery, so we should put humans out of their misery too. Then you're equating a human to a cow. You're equating a human to a dog. Are dogs wonderful, wonderful beasts that shower us with love? Absolutely. But is a dog a human? No. Hey, so things you need to be wary of. What I want you to do now is come up with your own example of either a faulty analogy or come up with your own example of, actually, no, we did ad hominem fallacy. Come up with your own example of faulty analogy. Ready, set, go. All right, Venzlin. Hit me with the faulty analogy.
Okay, I'm not 100%. But I thought of perfume commercials.
Uh-huh.
Perfume, and they think they'll make you glamorous and fancy.
Absolutely. Just by
The part-
having a certain scent. How ridiculous are some of those perfume commercials? It's like somebody like running in a nightgown along like a shore, and then they fall into the water and it's Dior. Those things are ridiculous. Yes. Tyler, what do you have for faulty analogy?
Great. Because onions are like odors, humans should stop consuming them.
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense. Midbrod.
Clearly, all humans should switch to a dog food diet. We are all mammals after all. We all have fur, and it would be a lot more cost effective and better for the environment if we wouldn't have so much food waste. Just be all eating dog food. It can be stored forever. Then we don't need refrigerators, and so then we're cutting down on our emissions. Dog food's already required to be edible by humans.
Yeah, it just makes too much sense not to. Wonderful faulty analogy. One more. It's hard to come on the heels of that one. Heel, get it? Dog joke? Never mind. All right. Next up for our fallacies. Fallacies of accuracy. So using evidence that is inaccurate. Now this seems like something like, duh. Of course we're not going to use inaccurate evidence. Of course I'm not going to use like made up statistics or things like that. But it's a little bit more subtle than that when you think about fallacies of accuracy.
Yeah,
One,
it's like when you cut me down about my idea of how we got social media,
say that again.
of how
Oh,
Facebook originated.
Yeah, yes. So that was you using inaccurate information. But like a more simple, but also more dangerous way of thinking about that is the straw man fallacy. So that's a deliberately poor or oversimplified example in order to refute a viewpoint. A straw man fallacy and a fallacy of analogy or a faulty analogy are kind of similar. Okay, so I oversimplify something in order to refute something. So for example, let's say that we're debating whether or not to send a human mission to Mars. Okay, so that's the argument that we're having right now. And I say, yes, we should go to Mars. Venzlin says, nope, we shouldn't go to Mars. I say we should go to Mars because of, all of the scientific research that can be done. Interplanetary exploration is positive because this, that, and the other thing. The main point of Venzlin's argument is that it's going to cost way too much money. And we could better spend the billions and billions of dollars that we would spend on going to Mars on things at home. Do you all understand the terms of our argument right now? Okay, so Venzlin and I are engaged in a debate, and I'm bringing up my stuff, Venzlin's bringing up her stuff, and then all of a sudden Venzlin goes, we shouldn't put men on Mars because we're not going to waste money looking for little green men. So this is alluding to her argument, right? We're not going to waste money. But how is this a oversimplified analysis of my argument?
Because you're talking about everything that would benefit from that, like scientific research and stuff like that, and then she's just like, we should be looking for little green men.
Yeah, she's throwing all that to the side and just
She's throwing it into a bowl of just trying to prove a conspiracy.
and she's making me sound like I'm ridiculous and like I'm one of those tinfoil hat wearing people who's concerned about little green men. So she's completely, this is almost a red herring in that she's completely trying to change the terms of the argument. I want to talk about the benefits of the science. She wants to talk about the cost. Are those fair arguments to make? Absolutely. But when one half of the person tries to subvert the other half by creating the straw man fallacy, well, that's where we move away from they say, I say intellectual discourse, and we move into wild misrepresentations that take ideas off topic. Example of a straw man fallacy? that they've experienced in their life or in their debate? Has anyone ever run across somebody who oversimplifies a complex issue?
I was once arguing about like the immorality of shark fin soup because I was obsessed with sharks.
Mm-hmm.
And they said we kill other fish. Like, why can't we kill sharks?
That would be a faulty analogy. Why would that be a faulty analogy? We kill other fish, so why don't we kill sharks?
Because sharks aren't the same with the rest of the fish.
How so?
They're
Well, and also, are there abundant supplies of other fish?
Yeah.
Are there abundant supplies of sharks? No. So that's that would be a faulty analogy. The most obvious place to look for this, the most obvious place to look for all this stuff is in the political discourse. You know, think back to when President said, you know, Mexico sends us their murderers and their rapists.
Mm-hmm.
How is that?
It's oversimplification.
How is that an oversimplification?
Because that's not the majority of the immigrants that come through.
Right. So we're oversimplifying it. What happened to my strawman argument? No, right here. We're oversimplifying the terms of the discussion. Are there valid arguments to be made on both sides of how much immigration should be allowed in the United States? Or how many people we can take in from other countries? Yeah, absolutely. But when you oversimplify it, that's when you end up with people just bouncing back. Straw man fallacies, ad hominem fallacies, back and forth at one another. You move away from the topic, and then the topic doesn't get addressed. All right. We got 4 more minutes. The last one, not last one. Another one, classic false dilemma. You present 2 extreme options as the only options. So
like liberal versus conservative.
right, yeah. We can either have high taxes or we can be riddled in debt. We can either, if you have high taxes, then the economy is going to tank and life is going to be hard.
We can either have more gun control or tons
Yeah,
of shootings.
yeah. Our only 2 options as a society are to have no guns or to have everyone have guns all the time. Those are 2 extreme options. And don't acknowledge the gray area that comes in the middle. We can either pretend like you have a dog that kind of nips at people when they come in. Okay? We can either agree to, this is supposed to say put down. We can either agree to put down the dog or everyone's going to get bit. That's not accurate, right? You can train the dog, you can muzzle, you can put the dog away. The only 2 the options are not just put the dog down or everyone's going to get bit. What's another example of a false dilemma? Parents use this all the time.
You can either do your homework tonight or go to prison.
Yeah. If you don't graduate from high school, then you're going to go to prison and live under a bridge. Yep, absolutely. Yep. If you don't do your homework, you're going to fail.
Oh, here's my most recent one. So you can either go to Solid Rock and end up having to work at McDonald's to help support yourself, or you can do what I want you to do and go to 6 years of schooling.
Yeah. There's a lot of gray area in between. The idea that your options are only to work at McDonald's or go to 6 years of schooling and do thing Y, that would be a false dilemma. Let's stop there for right now. You said I want to overload you. For tomorrow, there are 10 pages that you need to read. Read pages 166, not 10, 8. You're in great shape. 166 to 174. So put that in your book. 166 to 174. Just need to read it. Yep.
You don't need to take any notes or anything. You're not going to use this information at all.
You're going to use it tomorrow. But you don't need to have anything done for it tomorrow. You just need to have it read.
I already forgot. In what page?
166 to 174.
It'll probably get put on Google Classroom, guys. Chill.
Sure will, along with this cool video.
For this class, we have to do the podcast.